So let's talk about the validation. So how do you do that with the validation? We talked about the tides. So is the model able to predict the tides? So also in the model, you can extract the amplitudes and the phases of the simulated tides. Okay, and you learn from the discussion is that, for example, in Upper Spencer Gulf, you have a tidal amplification. So the question is, does the model reproduce this? Okay. So, and what's done here is in these two graphs, it actually shows you a comparison between the predicted and the observed amplitudes of time. And if you have a perfect agreement, you would have all your points for different locations should sit along a line. Okay, a line that just goes diagonally around across the domain. And you can see that the model does not perfectly simulate the tides. And this is shown here for the same location that you see in the table. Spencer Gulf and Gulf St. Vincent are distinguished here. You can see that it's not perfect, but it's not too bad. Okay, you get the high tidal amplitudes and the upper reaches of the Gulfs. And the timing, again, some regions it's a little bit off by an hour or so, but again, it's not too bad. So it's not the aim of this model to get the tides perfect, because in order to get the tides perfect, you need to be able to have all the fine bathymetric details and the shapes of the coastline and stuff. This is a relatively coarse model, and the aim is just to get everything good, reasonably good, with the aim to simulate the seasonal variations of density-driven flow. All right, so that's the first bit. So what else do you need to calibrate? Well, the other thing which is key is you need to be able to simulate the seasonal cycles of temperature and salinity in different locations. Okay, let's do that on the next slide. Here are observations and simulation results. And what's shown here is just focus on the left diagram. First are temperature salinity time diagram. Okay, this is a temperature salinity graph, and each dot represents a monthly average of temperature and salinity. So I switch on the pointer. It's also red here. It's a little bit okay. So let's have a look. Let's have a look here. There are 3 different locations shown in Spencer Gulf, whereby the distance here shown in brackets is actually the distance to Port Augusta. So this beacon 5 is close, nearby Port Augusta. So that's the distance to Port Augusta. It's in the Upper Spencer. And you can see the cycles. You can see the cycles that the salinity increases and then water gets colder. Salinity decreases and gets warmer. So you see the seasonal range of temperature and salinity in the Upper Spencer Gulf. And the first thing that you notice is that the salinity is hypersaline water throughout the year. Okay, it's always around 41 to 43. It always stays hypersaline. You go closer, you go into the middle. It's like Wallaroo is sort of halfway through Spencer Gulf, 160 kilometers away from Port Augusta, and you get a similar feature. Again, you get a seasonal cycle. Okay, temperature reflects the warming and cooling cycle, and you also get a salinity cycle due to evaporation and the influence of ambient currents. Overall, the salinity is lower, okay, but still hypersaline. And then on the shelf, outside the entrance of Spencer Gulf, you again get a cycle, but it's mainly temperature that dominates the variation. So 2 features. One is the model simulation is not bad, is close to the observations. It's good enough. It represents the ranges, okay, and the timing is also not too bad. So you might be off by 1 degree, okay. So don't complain. So this is not a perfect model. The other feature is you can see these lines are isopycnals. The lines are density contours, and you can see now what happens in terms of density differences. Okay, on the shelf is between 1025 and 1026.5 kilograms per cubic meter. That's the sigma t here. You have to add 1000 to it. You come to the true density. And it looks like that the density is always higher in along Spencer Gulf. Okay, it's definitely true in the upper Spencer Gulf. It's always higher density here. But now have a look at the difference between Wallaroo and the shelf. Okay, this is summertime. During summertime, you actually have the same type of density. Okay? There is almost no density difference. In wintertime, you have a big difference here. You can see you cross all these density contours. So there is something happening on a seasonal basis between summer and winter. So Gulf St. Vincent, we have fewer data points here. It shows you some measurements from the Adelaide Coastal Water Study, but overall you get a very similar feature. Okay, head of the Gulf is always hypersaline. Okay, and you get sort of a pronounced seasonal cycle of temperature and salinity. Okay? So that's the starting point. Now, how does it look like? Let's have a look at the simulation of the salinity field, of the near bottom salinity.